What happens if you take the next week to speak only words of love and gratitude to your glass of water before drinking it? Could this simple experiment change how you feel physically or emotionally? The results just might surprise you. Imagine if every time you spoke, the water around you could absorb, reflect, and even respond to your words. It sounds almost mystical, doesn't it? After all, water is so seemingly simple. It's the liquid we pour, swim in, drink. It's everywhere, yet we rarely stop to think about its nature beyond its chemical formula, H2O. But for many indigenous cultures and spiritual traditions, this view is incomplete. For them, water isn't just an element, it's alive, it's aware, awe. And, believe it or not, the way we treat water, the way we interact with it, can affect its very essence. Pat McCabe, also known as Woman Stands Shining, is an indigenous activist and a member of the Navajo Nation. She teaches that water holds wisdom and that it has a kind of intelligence we often overlook. In her way of thinking, water isn't just a resource, it's a relative, a being with whom we coexist. McCabe often speaks about how her traditions taught her to honor water, not just in ceremonies but in everyday life. She describes water as a life giver, a carrier of memory, and even as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. Her teachings resonate with the ways many indigenous peoples see water, not merely as a molecule, but as something sacred. This perspective feels worlds apart from the modern scientific view of water as simply a chemical compound that follows measurable physical laws. In Western understanding, water is analyzed primarily for its properties, how it freezes, evaporates, flows. It's a substance we measure and manipulate, but rarely reflect on in any deeper sense. There's little room here for the idea of water as a conscious or communicative force, intrigued. And yet, indigenous wisdom offers a striking counterpoint, the belief that water responds to care. Blessing water, speaking to water, these practices are common among cultures with spiritual ties to nature. Some even hold that water retains the intention or emotions it's exposed to. A stark contrast to the clinical precision of science textbooks. To better grasp this idea of living water, let's consider how it appears across cultures. Take, for example, the Christian tradition of holy water. It's not just ordinary water, it's blessed water, imbued with spiritual significance. Holy water is believed to purify, protect, and even heal. Similarly, in Hinduism, water plays a central role in rituals and ceremonies. The Ganges River, often called Mother Ganga, is worshipped as a goddess. Hindus believe its waters are spiritually potent, capable of washing away not just physical dirt but also spiritual impurities. These practices reflect the idea that water is alive in some intangible way, carrying a divine quality that transcends its physical properties. The concept of living water versus dead water reinforces this idea further. Living water refers to water that moves, flows, and exists in its natural state, untouched by human interference. Think of the pristine waters of a mountain spring or a waterfall. In contrast, dead water might describe stagnant or processed water, stripped of its vibrancy. Many cultures believe that living water is more potent, not just in terms of taste or cleanliness, but in how it interacts with life. It's seen as energetic, full of vitality, whereas dead water feels inert, lacking in spirit. While science might dismiss this distinction as unquantifiable, it mirrors how indigenous peoples often see nature as interconnected, with energy and life present in all things. To make sense of these ideas, it might help to picture water as a kind of mirror. Imagine holding up a physical mirror. It reflects your image, doesn't it? But what if water, instead of reflecting a physical form, reflects the energy or intention it encounters? For instance, when a ceremonial leader blesses water during a ritual, the belief is that the water absorbs this intention and carries it forward. This metaphor of water as a mirror can help explain why so many rituals revolve around it. In essence, water is seen as a transporter, a carrier of energy that connects people, places, and even the divine. Some might find this notion hard to reconcile. It feels elusive, almost like trying to hold water in your hand. But it's precisely this fluid, flexible nature of water that allows such interpretations to flourish. And the reverence for water as a sacred element doesn't stop at indigenous or spiritual traditions. Even within more modern contexts, water retains a symbolic role. Think about baptism, for instance. Whether it's a full immersion in a river or a few drops on the forehead, the act is symbolic of cleansing, renewal, and transformation. These rituals tap into something universal, the belief that water holds power beyond its physical characteristics. There's also a practical side to these ideas. Some indigenous communities believe that water treated with gratitude or care retains a higher energy, making it healthier for consumption. Though the term energy might not align with scientific jargon, many traditional practices around water blessing revolve around this concept. Solemn. In ceremonies, water is often offered to the earth, to ancestors, or to the community, with the understanding that it carries blessings back to those it touches. This perspective challenges the Western notion of water as merely a commodity to be extracted, bottled, and sold. Why? When you think about it, hearing water described as alive makes sense in a fundamental way. Without water, we don't just lose a resource, we lose the thing that sustains us. It's in our cells, it's in the air, it's the foundation of ecosystems. And when it's polluted, neglected, or stripped of its vitality, the damage ripples outwards, impacting life on every level. By perceiving water as sacred, ancient cultures remind us of its value, not only chemically, but spiritually. Perhaps treating water as alive pushes us closer to treating it and the world around us with the respect it deserves. That's why the indigenous view of water extends far beyond measuring oxygen levels or H2O molecules. This perspective urges us to look at water as more than what fills a glass or flows down a river. It reminds us that water sustains, reflects, and connects us in ways that often go unnoticed. And if you start to imagine this possibility, that water might be more than just a liquid, you're not alone. You're tapping into a way of thinking that stretches back through generations, echoing across ceremonies, cultures, and now even the edges of science. What if water could hold memories, not just of the places it's flowed, but of the words and emotions it has encountered? This might sound a little far-fetched, yet researchers and philosophers alike have been fascinated by water's potential to remember. It's a concept that challenges how we think of the world around us, and it goes beyond the poetic traditions of the past into some truly surprising experiments. A name that often comes up when discussing this idea is Dr. Masaru Emoto. He was a Japanese researcher who believed water wasn't as passive as we typically assume. Through his experiments in the late 1990s and early 2000s, Emoto claimed to show that water could physically respond to external stimuli, everything from music to human emotions. The process itself was simple yet striking. He would expose water to specific words, pieces of music, or even emotional states, then freeze the water and observe the crystals that formed. What he found stunned many of his followers. Water that had been exposed to positive words like love or gratitude formed beautiful, harmonious patterns when frozen. On the other hand, water exposed to negative phrases like "you fool" appeared chaotic, disorganized, and asymmetrical. He didn't stop there. Emoto extended his experiments to music, reporting equally dramatic outcomes. Classical compositions like Mozart or Beethoven supposedly created stunning, symmetrical crystalline formations in the water. Heavy metal music? The opposite, distorted, jagged shapes. According to Emoto, these results suggested that water was not just reactive, but also capable of reflecting external energies and intentions. It wasn't just responding to the tone of sound or the structure of speech. It was resonating with the emotional energy behind them. Former Dakleys with a tosebration, fix as the monetic clamp, as Dakleysum of compet, Why is farnantisnes fiandilisi to subvenis evralintentiary. So yes, the implications of Emoto's work were immense. If water could truly listen and respond to the intentions directed toward it, that means it could also serve as a conduit for human consciousness. Think about it. If 70% of the human body is water, as science reminds us, then how we speak or act might influence our very cells. This idea aligns beautifully with the reverence indigenous cultures have long held for water, adding another dimension where ancient wisdom could intersect with modern science. And yet, not everyone was convinced. Almost as quickly as Emoto's ideas gained traction among the public, his work came under fire from scientists. Skeptics pointed to a lack of rigor in his experimental methods, specifically accusing him of confirmation bias. Creating and photographing water crystals is inherently subjective. Someone has to decide, for instance, if a crystal looks harmonious or not. Without more controlled, repeatable conditions, critics argued, the findings remained speculative. Efforts to replicate his experiments also struggled, further widening the gap between Emoto's admirers and the broader scientific community. The debate didn't stop with Emoto's work. A separate but related concept, the theory of water memory, had already been introduced years earlier, and it continued to push boundaries in scientific thought. First proposed in 1988 by French immunologist Jacques Benveniste, water memory describes the idea that water can retain information about substances it has come into contact with even after those substances are no longer present. His experiments showed that water diluted with a substance, and diluted so extensively that no molecules of the original substance could reasonably remain, continued to demonstrate effects as if the substance were still there. This research, if correct, could have revolutionized fields like pharmacology, suggesting that even highly diluted homeopathic treatments might contain more than just placebo effects. However, much like Emoto, Benveniste faced intense skepticism. Critics pointed out that water molecules are constantly in motion. The bonds that form between hydrogen and oxygen atoms in water break and reform millions of times every second. To mainstream scientists, the idea that such an inherently chaotic system could store information seemed implausible. Benveniste's work ultimately failed to gain widespread acceptance, especially as replication efforts faltered. There were moments that rekindled interest in the idea. One particularly surprising contribution came from Nobel laureate Luc Montagnier, the virologist famous for discovering the HIV virus. Montagnier found that water exposed to highly diluted DNA emitted electromagnetic signals corresponding to the DNA's presence, despite the original molecules being diluted past the point of detection. These faint signals suggested that water was remembering its prior contact with the DNA. While Montagnier's findings remain controversial, they added weight to the argument that water's properties might be more complex than we ever imagined. Beyond the question of memory, the very structure of water provides clues about its unique responsiveness to external factors. Water is what's called a polar molecule, with its slight electrical charge enabling it to interact in countless ways with its environment. Its structure is constantly reorganizing itself based on temperature, light, and even sound. In fact, studies have demonstrated that electromagnetic fields and certain sound frequencies seem to influence water at a molecular level. For example, water exposed to high-frequency sounds can show changes in its hydrogen bonding network, which could, in theory, affect how it interacts with other substances. The idea that water might respond to stimuli isn't limited to fringe theories either. One double-blind study published in the Journal of Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine found water treated with intention produced more aesthetically appealing ice crystals than untreated water when frozen. This echoes Emoto's work while lending it a degree of scientific rigor. Though the mechanisms behind this phenomenon remain unclear, researchers suggested that the energy from human intention could somehow be subtly influencing the water's molecular arrangement. This fits into a broader understanding of water's receptive properties. Some scientists speculate that water's interactions with electromagnetic fields or sound waves provide a pathway for temporary, if subtle, structural shifts. Could it be possible, then, that our words or thoughts as forms of energy leave their imprint on water? While the evidence isn't conclusive, it hints at a layer of complexity in water that we're just starting to uncover. Even the skeptics can agree on one thing: there is still much we don't know about water. With its ability to sustain life, dissolve substances, and enable countless biological reactions, water is already extraordinary. Whether it can remember or respond remains a tantalizing question, one that straddles the line between acknowledged science and the unexplored fringes of possibility. It's worth noting that this debate reflects a broader tension in science itself. On one side, we have the desire for repeatable, testable results. On the other, there's the recognition that some phenomena might not yet fit squarely within current methodologies. Ancient traditions have long spoken of water as holding life, memory, and intention. Scientific discoveries, while still in their infancy on this topic, may one day offer insights that bring us closer to these age-old understandings. So far, the full nature of water's potential remains elusive, but these hints at something deeper are compelling. If water can, in some way, be influenced by its environment or even by us, it could change the way we think about it entirely. Not just as a liquid that sustains us, but as something that reflects us, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions. Could this be the bridge between science and spirituality? Time and further research will tell. But let's say it's true, even in a subtle sense. If water remembers what it's exposed to, what does that mean for how we interact with it daily? If speaking positively to water changes its structure, as some studies suggest, how can we intentionally use this knowledge to improve our lives or connect more deeply with the natural world? Can your thoughts, your mood, your intentions influence something as simple as the water you drink? Proponents of a practice known as programming water believe so. It's a fascinating idea that the words you say or the energy you project can change water's essence, giving it qualities that align with your desires or emotions. This isn't a new concept. It's rooted in traditions that treat water as sacred and alive. But it has also found a place in modern wellness trends, where mindfulness meets hydration. Let's step into this intriguing space, where ancient practices and personal rituals offer new ways of thinking about something we use every day. One of the most common techniques in programming water is deceptively simple. The idea is to hold a glass of water, focus your thoughts on a specific intention, and imagine transferring that intention directly to the liquid. You might say affirmations aloud, visualize a safe and healthy life, or just quietly express gratitude for the water itself. While this might feel unusual at first, it's very much in line with practices seen in indigenous traditions, where water blessings and ceremonies are acts of profound respect. Across centuries, rituals involving water have been used to connect with spiritual forces, cultivate healing, and set positive intentions. Take, for instance, the simple act of saying a prayer before drinking. In faiths like Christianity, the blessing of water transforms it into holy water, believed to carry properties that purify and protect the spirit. A similar principle exists in other cultural rites. In Japan, Shinto rituals treat natural water sources as sacred, often involving purification rites using flowing water. These actions are more than just ceremonial, they're symbolic of a deeper truth shared across cultures. That water is not inert. It's a gateway. Even in moments as small as pausing to think about its significance, it becomes a reflection of your intention and awareness. Modern advocates for programming water often cite the controversial work of Dr. Masaru Emoto to support these ideas. As you may recall, Emoto's experiments involve freezing water after exposing it to positive or negative influences. Harmonious crystals formed when the water was treated with positive words or pleasant music, while chaotic formations emerged under harsher conditions. Though widely debated, the imagery connected with many people on an intuitive level. It seemed to suggest that the water in front of us is sensitive to energy, perhaps even sharing a kind of dialogue with its surroundings. Critics, of course, question the scientific rigor of these experiments, but they've nevertheless inspired practices like intentional blessings and meditative rituals involving water. For some, programming water feels like an extension of mindfulness. By setting an intention, whether it's an affirmation of health, gratitude, or peace, they interact with their environment in a focused, meaningful way. Drinking that water then becomes more than a mechanical act. It's transformed into a small ritual that aligns with the state of mind they wish to foster. The physical act of holding the glass, the mental concentration on positive thoughts, these things can bring a calm and reflective pause to daily routines. And even skeptics have to admit, the power of taking a moment to slow down and center your mind isn't something that requires scientific proof to be valuable. Curiously, there are also stories, anecdotal but compelling, from people who have incorporated this practice into their lives. Some claim noticeable boosts in energy throughout the day. Others speak about feeling more present or in tune with their bodies after consistently blessing their water. While these results can't be measured or tested in a lab, they hint at something that often gets overlooked in studies about water: the link between belief and well-being. Even if the changes experienced are subtle or even psychological, the act of programming water encourages a healthier relationship not just with water, but with oneself. A simple and accessible method for programming water starts with focus. Hold the glass, take a breath, and think of something you want to manifest. For some, this might be good health or strength. For others, it could be clarity or calm during a stressful time. Many practitioners suggest using a phrase like, "Thank you for blessing me with," followed by your desire. This might sound a bit new age to some, but the practice itself echoes habits that humans have used for centuries. It's grounded in gratitude, a recognition of what water provides and what you hope to gain from it in return. And even if there's nothing inherently magical happening in the water itself, the intention behind it can have real mental and emotional benefits. Programming water also naturally draws you into mindfulness. It's a moment to reflect on what you're drinking and why. So much of our everyday experience takes water for granted. How quickly we pour a glass, set it aside, and move to the next thing. For people who embrace this practice, taking that extra step to pause, reflect, and engage with the act of drinking water changes its role in their day-to-day lives. It's no longer background noise, it becomes a conscious interaction, a ritual of self-care. Whether you see this as spiritual or purely psychological, there's something empowering about reclaiming an Of course, not everyone agrees with the concept of programming water. To some, it's impossible to reconcile with scientific principles. A frequently raised argument is that water molecules constantly shift and reorganize. How, skeptics ask, would something as intangible as intention influence a physical substance. There's also the question of reproducibility. The subtle shifts suggested by experiments, like Emoto's, don't always hold up under stricter scientific controls. Still, dismissing the practice entirely would overlook why so many are drawn toward it. It's not necessarily about proving water itself changes, it's about the changes people experience in themselves, whether through mindfulness, gratitude, or something harder to measure. Interestingly, the very skepticism surrounding water programming has parallels in other practices that were initially dismissed. Look at meditation. Decades ago, it was often labeled as pseudoscience, a spiritual practice that couldn't be tied to measurable results. Today, neuroscience reveals its profound effects on the brain and body. Could water programming someday find similar footing, where science bridges gaps with long-standing beliefs? That remains to be seen, but it's worth noting that water itself is mysterious in ways that remain underexplored. We already know it's vital to life, dynamic at a molecular level, and affected by external forces like sound or temperature. Musing, assuming there's nothing more to uncover, may simply limit the possibilities. For those curious about trying it, programming water doesn't require special tools or elaborate rituals. You don't need research backing you or centuries of tradition. All it asks is that you pay attention for a moment, stop, breathe, focus, and connect. Whether the change you see will be in the water itself or in how you feel after drinking it is something you'll have to discover yourself. What you're doing, essentially, is creating a feedback loop of intention. Your thoughts influence your actions, and your actions, like sipping that water you've just blessed, reinforce the thoughts you wanted to cultivate. This idea might not resonate with everyone, and that's okay. What matters is the principle behind it, the act of treating something as ordinary as water with care and recognition. It becomes a reminder of how the most basic things in life sustain us in ways we often ignore. And when you consider that your own body is mostly water, that same care can extend inward, forming a loop that connects what you drink with who you are. This ripple effect, the way something as small as a thought could shape the way you approach the day, might be the most fascinating part of all. If water truly holds any capacity to be influenced by thought, it raises an interesting question. Does the impact depend on the water itself? Are some waters more receptive than others? Perhaps the answer lies not just in the practice of programming, but in understanding the types of water we interact with every day. Let's explore that next. Have you ever thought about where your water comes from? Beyond just a faucet or a bottle? Could the type of water you drink make a difference not just for your physical health, but also for how it interacts with your mind and emotions? For some people, water is just water. But for others, the distinctions between spring water, filtered water, distilled water, and tap water may reveal something deeper, something that goes beyond taste, mineral content, or purity. The question isn't just about whether water is clean, it's about whether some water is more alive than others, and whether the water you choose could subtly alter your relationship with it. Let's start with spring water, often romanticized as the purest form of water. Straight from the earth and untouched by industrial processes, spring water is thought to have a vitality that sets it apart from other types. This perspective doesn't just focus on the fact that it's free-flowing or rich in natural minerals, it's also about movement. Natural spring water, bubbling up from underground, is constantly in motion, and this movement, according to some, keeps it alive. Proponents of this idea suggest that when water flows and interacts with rocks, soil, and minerals, it takes on a unique structure, what some call a harmonious or energetic arrangement of its molecules. Think of a mountain stream, shimmering and unpredictable, as opposed to a pool of stagnant water. This movement isn't just aesthetic. It's seen by many as a reflection of life itself. Compare that to distilled water, which is often referred to as the opposite. Distilled water is stripped of its minerals through a boiling and condensation process, leaving behind pure H2O with little else inside it. This might sound ideal in theory. Clean water with no contaminants. But there's a downside. Without its natural minerals, distilled water lacks the grounded, nutrient-rich properties found in spring water. Some argue that this makes it less effective at hydrating the body or providing the nutrients your cells crave. And beyond the physical implications, enthusiasts of structured water, a type of water believed to hold more energy, suggest that distilled water lacks the vibrancy or charge seen in more natural sources. Filtered water provides a middle ground by removing impurities without going as far as to strip away beneficial minerals. Filtration systems offer a balance of purity and nutrition. Depending on the process, whether it's a carbon filter, reverse osmosis, or another method, filtered water can become cleaner while still retaining elements that are thought to contribute to its life. Reverse osmosis systems, in particular, offer an intensive way to purify water by forcing it through a membrane, separating out nearly everything but the water itself. Many people use these types of systems to ensure the water they consume is free from harmful contaminants like pesticides, heavy metals, or chlorine. While this doesn't directly tie into broader questions of water's energy, it might explain why some feel healthier and more connected when they switch to filtered water. Natural water sources raise another fascinating idea. Could water retain information from where it's been? For centuries, some traditions have believed that water carries the memory of its surroundings. While mainstream science points out that the hydrogen bonds of water molecules break and reform constantly, there's still curiosity about whether water could retain traces, energetic if not physical, of what it's encountered. This concept plays heavily into the distinction between water that comes from natural springs and water that's been heavily processed or stored in artificial conditions for long periods of time. Studies into water's molecular structure suggest that its arrangement can shift based on external forces. Electromagnetic fields, temperature, and sound waves, for example, can subtly rearrange water's bonds, even if only momentarily. Advocates for structured water, sometimes referred to as hexagonal water, claim it has a more stable, organized structure compared to regular water. This structure, they argue, allows it to vibrate at higher energies and become more bioavailable, meaning it can be absorbed more effectively by cells. They often describe structured water as similar to the water found in fruits and vegetables or in untouched spring sources. It's said to hydrate better and even help remove toxins from the body more efficiently. Critics, however, remain skeptical, pointing out that water molecules are constantly in motion, adapting their shape billions of times per second. From a scientific perspective, the idea of water maintaining a stable, structured form isn't widely accepted. Nonetheless, the popularity of structured water products and systems reflects people's enduring curiosity around this concept. So, where does tap water fit into all of this? In many ways, tap water is the most practical choice for billions of people around the world, treated with chemicals to kill bacteria and often supplemented with fluoride to promote dental health. Tap water ensures a basic level of safety and accessibility, but its journey, from treatment plants to pipes through massive urban infrastructure systems, means it loses much of the natural movement and interaction that spring water enthusiasts value. Beyond this, contaminants like chlorine, trace pharmaceuticals, or microplastics, while present in safe amounts, contribute to a growing unease for some. This leads many to reach for filters or opt for bottled water, thinking not only of safety but of taste and perhaps even its less tangible qualities. Here's where things take an interesting turn. If water from different sources carries certain properties, whether through its mineral, content, structure, or interactions with the environment, is it possible to revive processed water? Advocates for water rituals believe intention plays a role here. Just as thoughtful actions like meditating or speaking words of gratitude can bring people into a state of calm, similar actions directed toward water are thought to reintroduce vitality, regardless of its origin. In this view, even a simple glass poured from a tap can become living water when treated with care and intention. Perhaps it's less about reviving the water itself and more about transforming your relationship with it. This idea that water can reflect care and energy even after it's been processed or treated aligns with the broader conversation about how water interacts with life. It blurs the line between tangible properties and experiential ones, how water feels versus what it physically contains. People who incorporate intentional practices often describe shifts not just in how the water tastes, but in how they feel afterward. These changes might be subtle, yet they point to something people have believed for a long time. The way you treat water matters. Of course, there's plenty of debate about whether any of these ideas hold weight outside personal experiences. Scientific studies have struggled to find measurable differences between types of water when it comes to molecular properties, like structure or memory. The bonds between water molecules are incredibly short-lived, breaking and forming again within picoseconds, which raises questions about how water could store information over time. Additionally, claims that structured water hydrates better or enhances health remain speculative. Even so, the continued exploration of these ideas, whether through research or individual practice, keeps the conversation alive. The diversity in water options highlights a larger question: how do we decide what's best for both our bodies and our minds? While science provides a framework for understanding water's chemical properties, personal experiences often fill in the gaps that data can't. Maybe it's not just about what science can prove today, but about how we connect to the water we drink. Choosing spring water because it feels more alive, filtering tap water to ensure purity, or programming your water with gratitude, each choice reflects something deeper about our relationship to this vital substance. Not all water is created equal, at least not in the eyes of those who seek meaning in its source or treatment. And whether these differences are fundamentally physical, psychological, or even spiritual, they tell a story of our desire to bring intention to something as simple as a sip of water. What's most fascinating is how this interplay between belief and science continues to shape the way we think about water, not just as a liquid, but as a vital force. So where does all of this leave us? If water's perceived vitality can be influenced by our choices and attitudes, perhaps the skeptics are asking the wrong question. Instead of debating whether water memory or structured water truly exist, maybe what we need to ask is this: how does the way we interact with water shape its role in our lives? And importantly, does it really matter if science hasn't caught up with tradition yet? Let's explore what happens when we shift the focus to the skeptics themselves. What are the limits and the possibilities of science in explaining water's mysteries? Not everyone agrees with the idea that water can remember, respond, or hold energy. Some find these concepts inspiring, while others see them as nothing more than pseudoscience. But does this skepticism mean these ideas should be dismissed entirely? Let's explore the criticisms and controversies surrounding water memory, the belief in water's responsiveness, and how they continue to generate both intrigue and debate. One of the main criticisms of water memory lies in the physical nature of water itself. Scientifically, water is a constantly shifting substance. Its hydrogen bonds are dynamic, breaking and reforming millions of times per second. Because of this rapid molecular chaos, skeptics argue that water lacks the stability needed to store any kind of information. From this perspective, the idea that water could remember substances it has come into contact with seems incompatible with what we currently understand about its structure. Critics point to this as a key reason why water memory has struggled to gain traction within the scientific community. Another major hurdle is the difficulty in replicating the results of water memory experiments. Jacques Benveniste, the French immunologist who first suggested the possibility of water retaining information, faced intense scrutiny after his research was published. Initially, his findings caused a stir. His experiments used diluted solutions to show that water might retain an effect even after the active molecules were eradicated. But when other scientists attempted to repeat his experiments under similar conditions, they failed to observe the same outcomes. Without reproducibility, a cornerstone of the scientific method, Benveniste's claims were dismissed as unsubstantiated. What could have been a groundbreaking discovery was instead relegated to the fringes of mainstream science.
For critics, the lack of a plausible mechanism is another sticking point. How, they ask, could water physically store and transmit information? Without a widely accepted theoretical framework or verified process to explain such phenomena, skepticism remains high. Even intriguing patterns observed in experiments are often attributed to experimental error or confirmation bias, rather than evidence of water's ability to retain information. To many scientists, this absence of a convincing explanation weakens the case for water memory and casts doubt on its validity beyond anecdotal observations. The controversy extends to the work of Masaru Emoto, whose visually stunning water crystal experiments captivated the public but failed to convince much of the scientific community. While Emoto's images of harmonious crystals forming after exposure to positive words and chaotic crystals forming after negative ones are striking, critics argue that his methods lacked proper rigor. One of the main concerns is observer bias. Emoto's process required someone to decide which crystals were considered beautiful or distorted, introducing subjective judgment into the results. Combined with a lack of controls and difficulties replicating his work, these issues have fueled skepticism about whether his findings are more artistic than scientific. The concept of structured water faces similar scrutiny. Proponents claim it has a unique molecular arrangement that's more organized and energetically potent than ordinary water. Some even suggest it hydrates the body more effectively because of this special arrangement. However, scientists are quick to point out that water molecules are inherently unstable, shifting and rearranging constantly. Any structured patterns that may form are likely temporary, lasting only fractions of a second. Without consistent, measurable proof that structured water offers benefits beyond clean drinking water, many dismiss these claims as marketing rather than meaningful science. Still, there's more to this debate than outright dismissal. While many in the scientific community reject the idea of water memory, as currently presented, some remain open-minded about the underlying concept. Water is an extraordinary substance, vital to all forms of life and capable of behaviors that continue to puzzle researchers. For instance, water's ability to respond to sound waves, electromagnetic fields, and other environmental factors is well documented. While these interactions don't confirm theories like water memory, they hint at complexities that may not yet be fully understood. Luc Montagnier, who won a Nobel Prize for his work on the HIV virus, conducted research that reignited some interest in these possibilities. Montagnier claimed to have observed electromagnetic signals emitted by water when it was exposed to highly diluted DNA. While his findings are controversial and remain unproven, they suggest that water might interact with its environment in ways we don't completely understand. Montagnier's work reflects an openness to investigate water's properties. even as others remain skeptical about whether such results amount to meaningful evidence. This divide between skepticism and curiosity highlights an ongoing tension within science: the push for rigorous proof versus the willingness to explore the unknown. On one hand, the failure to replicate studies like those of Benveniste and Emoto undermines their credibility. On the other, scientific progress often involves grappling with ideas that initially seem implausible. Meditation, for example, was once regarded as purely spiritual or pseudoscientific, but later studies confirmed its measurable benefits for brain health and stress reduction. Some wonder if water could follow a similar trajectory, with future research unlocking properties that align with the claims of water memory advocates. Even without robust scientific validation, there's another angle to consider: the psychological and subjective value of these practices. Speaking to water with positive intentions or using it in ceremonies might not objectively alter the water itself, but it could create meaningful experiences for the people involved. Intentional rituals often foster mindfulness and gratitude, both of which have documented benefits for mental health. From this perspective, the act of treating water as sacred or responsive might be less about the water and more about the person engaging with it. While skeptics focus on disproving material claims, they might overlook the intangible, emotional impact these practices can have. This interplay between belief and subjective experience is especially evident in ancient wisdom. Many practices once dismissed as superstition eventually gained scientific support, or at least empirical validation. Traditional herbs, mindfulness techniques, and even the healing power of touch were initially scoffed at by Western science, only to be embraced later. Could similar value be found in water-related rituals? Even if the science catches up at a slower pace, dismissing cultural practices outright risks overlooking their potential contributions to human well-being. Training within joy that tista moves yet, with water reliable breath. At the same time, it's important to approach these ideas critically. The potential placebo effect of rituals like programming water doesn't reduce their impact, but it does highlight the need for a balanced perspective. If treating water with care makes someone feel healthier or more connected to themselves, does it matter whether the water itself has actually changed? While science may question the mechanisms behind such practices, the point might lie elsewhere, in the intentional act of paying attention to something so fundamental to life. As research into water continues, the divide between critics and supporters remains sharp. On one side, scientists demand reproducible, measurable evidence before considering ideas like water memory or structured water. On the other, enthusiasts emphasize personal experience, tradition, and the possibility of forces beyond our current understanding. It's this unresolved tension that keeps the subject alive, sparking curiosity and debate in equal measure. Perhaps the most valuable takeaway from these controversies is the reminder that water, though chemically simple, holds profound significance physically, emotionally, and symbolically. Whether or not science validates the claims surrounding memory and structure, the way we engage with water and with nature as a whole shapes our relationship with it. Skeptics might dismiss water rituals as unscientific, but their effects on individuals can't always be dismissed so easily. At the very least, these practices remind us to pause and recognize something we depend on every day. So what can be learned from all this? Science, spirituality, and everything in between? It might not be necessary to take sides. Instead, the most interesting questions arise in the overlap, the space where science hasn't fully explained, and where personal meaning thrives. This, perhaps more than any experiment or controversy, is what keeps us asking, what is water really capable of? And more importantly, how can we honor its role in our lives? Whether or not water is listening,
It reflects something fundamental. The way we engage with it mirrors the care and intention we bring to all aspects of life. Water, ever present and vital, invites us to slow down and connect both to it and to ourselves. Try a simple experiment. Speak to your water with gratitude for a week. Notice how this small act may shift your mindset, your energy, or even your sense of well-being. Perhaps the most important question isn't whether water is conscious, but whether we are aware enough to recognize the depth of our connection to it.